Chosen one, from the moment you entered this world, the air around you trembled because some births only stir a room, but yours disrupted an entire order. That is why resistance followed you so early, why childhood felt like warfare before you even had weapons, why the weight on your shoulders never matched your age. Predators never chase the ordinary. They chase what carries fire, and you've carried it since birth. Every attack was not proof of your weakness, but of your worth. The energy people, systems, and even family spent trying to keep you contained was almost laughable because all you wanted was to live freely, yet their reaction revealed the truth. They sensed a revolution walking in your skin. You are not fragile, you are loaded. And the spoiler they prayed you'd never realize is this: you are the disruption they feared, and the awakening they could never stop. If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. What if I told you the years they mocked as wasted were the very years that preserved your crown? What if the silence they ridiculed was the oil that kept your lamp alive? Stay close, because by the end of this video, you will understand why they've been after you since birth and why every attempt against you failed. Number 1, the silence they misread. They looked at your stillness and thought it meant surrender, but it was consecration. You were being hidden in plain sight, protected under a veil they could not pierce. Isaiah 30 verse 15 says, "In quietness and trust is your strength," and that strength terrified them more than your loudest words ever could. They longed for you to explode, to lash out, to react in ways they could label and dismiss. But your silence became the mirror of their own chaos, exposing their fear while you stood unbroken. What they mocked as absence was the very shield that kept your spirit intact. Comment, "I seal this word in light," if you know the power of silence they never understood. Because chosen one, the oil of stillness was preparing you for fire, and the fire is about to rise. There comes a moment when a whisper within you feels older than your years, as if a voice that never belonged to time has finally spoken. You may recall standing in silence, yet feeling as though heaven itself leaned close to confirm what you had always suspected. Dreams that seemed scattered now begin to weave together, like fragments of a hidden scroll unrolling in your spirit. That stillness you carried, the pause others could not understand, was never emptiness but consecration. It was a sanctuary in plain sight, a chamber where your authority was being written in invisible ink. The question that lingers, why your silence felt heavier than their noise, is finally answered. They misread what heaven was sealing, and now that seal begins to glow. You know the feeling of being different, though you could not explain why. Even in crowded rooms, your spirit often felt like an exile, observing from a distance you could not measure. Their laughter never touched you the same way. Their games of status or control felt foreign to your heart. You carried a sensitivity that made you ache at cruelty others shrugged off as normal. Rejection pierced deeper than you admitted, because your soul longed for a place it had not yet found on earth. They called you too quiet, too strange, too intense, and yet all you were doing was surviving under a weight they could not name. The ache of not belonging was not weakness, it was proof of divine distinction. Now, you can see the threads that once looked random were stitched with holy intention. The wounds that left you silent were not accidents, but alignments. Every hidden season, every unanswered question was scaffolding for a structure not yet revealed. Isaiah 45 verse 3 declares, "I will give you treasures of darkness, riches stored in secret places," and you now realize those treasures were being planted in your silence. What they mistook for defeat was preservation. What they mocked as emptiness was sacred oil poured upon your spirit. Heaven was never absent in those quiet rooms where you felt invisible. Heaven was building you where no eyes could corrupt the work. Think of the subtle signs that brushed against your awareness, small enough to doubt, yet persistent enough to notice. Deja vu that made the air thicken around you, dreams that repeated until you could no longer dismiss them as coincidence. An inner knowing that tightened in your chest when you entered the wrong spaces, a peace that covered you when you chose to withdraw, the flutter of your spirit when someone spoke falsehood, even when you could not prove their lie. These were not random sensations. They were heaven's codes, quietly preparing your vision. Silence sharpened your perception, and your body itself became an antenna tuned to signals others never caught. You were being trained by signs too subtle for them to see. In that stillness, confirmation always lingered at the edges, waiting for you to trust it. The times you thought you were imagining, you were discerning, the nudges you ignored. You now see as instructions written on your spirit long before words reach your lips. Alignment unfolded not as thunder, but as a slow, steady unveiling that no hand of man could halt. You began to notice that every time you trusted your quiet knowing, peace followed like a cloak around you. This was never accident, it was design. The safety you found in silence was the voice of God Himself engraving strength into your soul. What they called avoidance was actually protection. Remembering who you are is not about adding something new, but uncovering what was buried under years of noise. You were not asked to become extraordinary, you were asked to remember that you already were. Beneath every label, every dismissal, every misunderstanding, your archetypal self waited patiently to rise. It is the self who knew the wilderness was not punishment but preparation. It is the self who held memory like a flame, refusing to be snuffed out. You are not arriving, you are returning. And the return is not into what they named you, but into what was sealed in you long before they spoke. This is where your silence turns into the first spark of empowerment. For every time you withdrew, instead of reacting, you carried your fire forward unseen. For every insult you absorbed without collapsing, your roots grew deeper in ground they could not touch. Sensitivity that once felt like a curse reveals itself now as sacred radar. Your spirit's hunger, your longing for more, your refusal to settle for their definitions, all of it was the first step into awakening. You did not crumble in silence, you grew dangerous there. Your wisdom was written in rooms where no applause echoed. And now, that wisdom has begun to rise as a weapon of light. So hear this clearly. You did not arrive at this message by coincidence. You were brought here as a sign that your silence was never wasted and that your path has always been guarded by purpose. Comment, I carry the silence as crown, if you know what it means to be underestimated and yet preserved by something greater. Let this word settle as both confirmation and invitation. Because chosen one, you are not walking into awareness, you are walking into remembrance. Their mockery was proof of your mark. Their misunderstanding was evidence of your difference. And their rejection was the very soil where your crown was planted. Stay with me, because what was once stillness is now about to become fire. What we do here every day is possible because of the few who choose to be keepers of this light. I thank them now, one by one, in the silence of my heart. If you want to be part of this circle and receive what cannot be spoken in public, join. The portal is below. Number 2, the fire that grew unseen. They thought rejection would extinguish you, but it became your furnace. Every insult they hurled, every betrayal they planted, became sparks that fed the hidden flame within. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 reminds us, the vision awaits an appointed time, and that flame was preserved for your appointed hour. Your loneliness was not emptiness. It was the sacred chamber where gold was separated from dust. Heaven kept your lamp burning unseen, guarded so no hand could snuff it out. What they meant for ruin only pressed oil into your spirit, making your flame impossible to kill. Comment, I walk crowned by eternal flame. If you know your hidden fire has been waiting for this hour, because chosen one, what was buried alive in you is about to rise in power. Stay near, because the covering that shielded you will soon be revealed. It often begins as a heaviness that cannot be traced to any single cause, a quiet pressure that follows you even in ordinary days. You sense conversations where your name is spoken in tones of envy, though no one admits it openly. Doors that should have swung open for you instead shut without reason, leaving you standing in confusion. The atmosphere itself at times feels thick, as though unseen eyes are watching for you to falter. What others dismiss as coincidence settles in your spirit as design, as though opposition had found you before you knew your own name. The discomfort lingers, sharpening your awareness until you cannot deny it any longer. Something has always been working against you, but it only proved that something greater was being preserved within you. The emotional weight of this resistance is not easily named, yet you have carried it like armor pressed into your chest. Isolation became familiar, not chosen by you, but imposed as if the world did not know where to place you. Misunderstandings multiplied, as though your voice was translated through distorted echoes that made you sound harsher or weaker than you were. People who should have celebrated your uniqueness instead accused you of being too much, too intense, or too different. Rejection carved valleys of shame, making you question your worth when you only longed to belong. Doubt circled you like a shadow, whispering that maybe the problem was you all along. But even in those valleys, your tears watered a soil that would one day grow unshakable strength. In time, you come to see that the resistance was not random at all. There were structures at work, patterns, systems, energies that sensed the potential you carried and reacted before you could fully awaken to it. Like Israel driven into the wilderness, your path carried exile as its hidden curriculum. Just as Joseph was thrown into a pit by jealous brothers, you were pressed down by those threatened by your dreams. And like Moses, who fled into obscurity before returning with authority, you too were hidden so the fire could grow unseen. These battles were never about your fragility, they were about your assignment. The opposition revealed itself because heaven had already marked you as untouchable, even when you felt most fragile. Looking back, patterns begin to unfold with startling clarity, like lanterns being lit in a dark hallway. Have you noticed how betrayals repeated with eerie similarity, as if the faces changed but the spirit behind them remained the same? Have you recognized how opportunities collapsed right before breakthrough, as though something worked to delay you? Even environments you thought were safe often turned draining, forcing you to retreat sooner than expected. These were not random accidents, but coded confirmations, each one whispering that you were never walking an ordinary road. Your life bore the marks of someone shielded and opposed, resisted because of the weight of what you carried. To see these patterns is unsettling, yet it is also liberating, for it proves your story was sacred all along. This is when spiritual resistance becomes visible, no longer hidden behind ordinary circumstances. The air around you thickens when you step into places you were never meant to remain. Doors close not because you are unworthy, but because heaven blocked entry to protect your flame. Silent watchers linger, observing from shadows without ever declaring their intentions, as if your presence itself disturbs unseen structures. You feel fog in conversations where clarity should live, confusion where truth should stand. Yet, even in this, light flickers within you, refusing to be extinguished. What they did not realize is that your fire was never theirs to control, it was preserved by hands they could not see. Your reactions to these pressures were human, yet holy. Sometimes you shrank back, convinced that silence would protect you from further pain. Other times you bent yourself into shapes that pleased others, only to feel your spirit recoil in quiet protest. There were seasons where rebellion simmered in you, expressed not in noise, but in a refusal to bow inwardly. Fear tempted you to surrender, to blend, to silence the very gifts that made you distinct. Weariness whispered that giving up would be easier than pressing on. Yet through every response, a deeper truth remained. You were never meant to disappear. The very fact that you survived those temptations became proof that your fire was impossible to extinguish. Now the narrative begins to shift, and the fire you carried in silence rises as your reclamation. You see now that the insults were sparks feeding the furnace, each betrayal adding fuel to the flame they tried to smother. Their rejection, meant to crush you, became your refining chamber, separating gold from dust within your soul. Every delay proved that heaven was not denying you, but sharpening you for an hour they could not imagine. You were hidden, yes, but hidden like a lamp waiting for the appointed time to shine. And now, chosen one, that time is drawing near. The resistance was confirmation, not condemnation, and your fire has only grown more dangerous because of it. Here lies the revelation. You were not opposed because you were weak, but because you were powerful. The clarity of your purpose grew sharper with every attempt to silence you. What they meant as sabotage became the very architecture of your strength. The reason you survived what others did not is because your fire was sealed by heaven's breath. Comment, I move guarded by divine fire. If you know your story carries proof of this truth, share the dream, the trial, or the season where resistance became your confirmation. Stay close now because the veil is thinning and the flame that grew unseen is about to blaze in ways they cannot ignore. Every word, every image you receive here is an offering. If you feel this word has touched you today, you can honor it with a sign right here below with a donation through the Super Thanks button. It is a small gesture, but it opens great doors. Number 3, the shield that covered you. What felt like abandonment was never rejection, it was preservation. Psalm 27 verse 5 declares, He will hide me in His shelter in the day of trouble, and chosen one, you were hidden under that covering. They spoke curses against your name, but their words fell back on their own heads. Every closed door, every unexplained delay, was a wall built by heaven so the snares of early destruction could not touch you. You were shielded in plain sight, your light too sacred for premature exposure. Your survival was never luck, it was proof that you were marked and sealed for a higher unveiling. Comment, I rise marked by the divine. If you felt that hidden hand covering you, and share the dream, the season, or the memory when you knew heaven was protecting you. Because chosen one, the shield is lifting, and when it does, even they will know why their plans always failed. There comes a moment when the air shifts, when the pattern you never understood begins to unveil its meaning. What once felt like abandonment suddenly appears as design, like threads of a hidden tapestry pulling together in your memory. You remember the strange seasons when you were pushed aside, but now they reveal themselves as protection. That job that slipped from your hands, the relationship that shattered, the invitation you never received, each was a wall built to preserve you. It wasn't that heaven ignored you, but that heaven covered you, concealing you from battles you weren't yet meant to fight. What they called your downfall was really a detour guided by unseen hands. And now you see it clearly. The silence around you was never empty, it was a shield. As this realization deepens, you start noticing how the moments of delay saved you from snares that would have destroyed you too soon. That rejection you cried over was the very thing that spared you from destruction, hidden in the places you longed to be. Closed doors became altars where heaven wrote, not yet, in letters too invisible for the world to read. You didn't understand then, but now you see that the roadblocks were barricades placed to protect your destiny. Every season of obscurity became proof that something higher had marked you as untouchable. The delay was not denial but preparation, sealing you until the time of unveiling. You were never forgotten. You were preserved like oil in a sacred vessel, guarded until the appointed hour. The spiritual codes start surfacing now, and what once confused you begins to align. Psalm 91 whispers of the shadow of the Almighty, and you remember the nights you should have been lost, but somehow survived. Isaiah 54 declares that no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and you recall the plans others built against you that collapsed in their own hands. Even Joseph, hidden in prison before the palace, becomes a mirror of your own hidden years. Heaven's pattern was not to expose you prematurely, but to preserve your strength until it could not be denied. You were sheltered, yes, but sheltered like a flame kept under glass until the storm passed. Your protection was not weakness, but wisdom written into your path by a hand greater than your own. And now the veil begins to lift, and you see that the shield was never absence but covenant. The inner signs intensify as you look back with fresh eyes. The heaviness you carried was not punishment, but insulation from energies that could not handle your light. The friendships that fell away were not betrayal alone, but pruning that cleared space for higher alignment. You remember the loneliness that once crushed you, now understood as consecration that guarded your purity of spirit. You were surrounded but untouched, hidden but not erased, delayed but never denied. Every no you faced was actually heaven whispering, "Not here, not now, not this." The recognition brings tears, because you realize how much love was present even in the silence. You were not abandoned, you were shielded in plain sight. As this recognition rises, external alignment begins to echo the inner truth. You notice how enemies expose themselves without you lifting a hand, as though divine justice was writing its own testimony. You see how opportunities circle back at the right time, no longer premature, but ripe for you to receive. The people who once dismissed you now watch in confusion, wondering why their efforts to sabotage you never bore fruit. The shield that covered you was invisible to them, yet its results were undeniable. It preserved you from premature exposure and guaranteed that your elevation would not be manufactured by man, but sealed by heaven. What looked like weakness was actually the highest form of strategy. What they thought was their victory was heaven's protection over your destiny. Memory awakens with sacred intensity, and you begin to recall dreams and whispers that now carry deeper meaning. That night vision you once dismissed as imagination now shines as prophecy fulfilled. That inner knowing you once doubted reveals itself as divine intelligence seated in your spirit. You remember seasons when you felt the hand of preservation, even if you couldn't explain it, walking away from a car accident, surviving sickness, escaping entanglements that later proved deadly for others. These memories no longer haunt you. They crown you with gratitude and holy awareness. Your survival was not random. It was coded proof that your story was never in human hands. You were marked, chosen, and preserved because your unveiling had to wait for the right moment. Now the clarity turns into empowerment and your reclamation begins. The resistance you faced was confirmation of the fire inside you. The betrayals you endured became the shield's testimony, showing you that you were worth protecting even when you felt discarded. You rise now, not as someone who survived by accident, but as someone preserved by covenant. The very shield that once kept you hidden now becomes your evidence, your witness, your authority. You stand as proof that heaven guards its own, that destiny cannot be destroyed by human hands. And the veil that once concealed you is lifting, revealing the strength that silence built in you. Here is the revelation. What they misread as abandonment was the greatest act of preservation over your life. You were hidden not to be erased, but to be crowned in the right season. Every delay was a wall of light, every silence a divine fortress, every rejection a secret blessing. Comment, "I walk hidden, yet never lost," if you know the shield was over you, and share the dream, the moment, or the season when you realized heaven's hand had covered you. Your words will anchor this revelation, and your testimony will ignite others who walked through similar veils. Remember, revelation is not the end, but the invitation into a new chapter of remembrance. And chosen one, the shield is lifting. What was once unseen will now blaze undeniable before every eye that doubted you. Number 4, the crown of quiet fire. Now comes the unveiling, not with noise, but with undeniable fire. 1 Kings 19 verse 12 tells us Elijah did not find God in the wind or the earthquake, but in a gentle whisper. And yet, that whisper shook nations. Your whisper seasons are ending, chosen one. Now, when you enter a room, the glow in your eyes and the weight in your voice cannot be denied. What they once mocked as defeat has become the very foundation of your elevation. You were not buried, you were planted, and now the crown rising on your head is the flame they could not extinguish. Comment, "I anchor this truth in my soul," if you feel the unveiling stirring within, and share which part of your story has become your strength. Because chosen one, your rising will blaze with quiet fire they will never put out. And from this fire, a greater revelation waits to be seen. There are moments in life when silence itself begins to smolder, carrying within it a heat too ancient to ignore. You sense it first as a whisper that does not vanish, a voice that feels older than your own years. It is as though a scroll sealed before your birth has been opened, and its words are echoing through your spirit. The hush that once felt like absence now trembles with authority, like embers hidden under ash waiting for breath. You realize that the long nights of obscurity were never wasted, for heaven was engraving a fire in your very bones. The stillness becomes alive with memory, revealing that silence was not weakness but the consecrated chamber of your becoming. And in this revelation, the whisper transforms into flame, lifting the veil of who you thought you were and unveiling the truth of who you have always been. In the hidden seasons, you carried a name unspoken, one written in the folds of eternity. They could not call you by it, because the world did not yet have ears for its sound. Yet heaven whispered it to you in dreams, in fleeting signs, in the pull you felt when everything else was quiet. That hidden name was your shield, guarding you from being claimed by voices that could not hold your destiny. It was not a title of man, but a mark of origin, proof that you were born from a higher design. Just as Revelation speaks of a new name known only to the one who receives it, you have walked with a secret identity too vast to fit the molds of others. Now, in the crown of quiet fire, that name begins to stir within you, no longer hidden but rising like dawn. The signs of your origin have always been etched upon you, even when you could not see them. A cloak woven of unseen threads rested upon your shoulders, marking you as different long before you understood why. Others could sense it, though they did not know what they were sensing, and so their reactions betrayed the unseen truth. Some were drawn to you with reverence, as if recognizing something rare, while others recoiled with fear or envy. The resonance of your presence has always disrupted illusions, and your silence itself became a sermon they could not ignore. What was invisible to the eye was undeniable to the spirit, and those awake enough to notice felt it without explanation. That mark, hidden yet undeniable, was heaven's seal upon you, testifying that you were never ordinary but chosen. Every hardship, every delay, every moment you felt misplaced was part of an ancient assignment. The fire that now crowns you was kindled in the trials that threatened to break you but could not. You walked paths where promises seemed delayed, yet every pause was heaven's timing device shaping your endurance. The sealed missions of your life were not written in ink, but in spirit, stars keeping their orbit until your moment arrived. Even the wilderness became a classroom, just as it did for Moses before the burning bush. You thought you were wandering, but you were walking in rhythm with a vow older than memory itself. And now that vow calls itself back to you, unfolding in this crown of quiet fire. The way people treated you begins to make sense through this lens of remembrance. Their reactions were not really about your actions, but about what you carried that unsettled their shadows. To some, your presence was comfort, awakening a forgotten hunger for truth. To others, it was threat, exposing what they fought to keep hidden. Love and hatred, reverence and rejection followed you like mirrors reflecting the resonance of your soul. You realize now that you were never simply navigating relationships, but serving as a living catalyst for others' awakenings or defenses. And in this mirror, you see that you were not defined by their responses, but by the eternal fire you carried into their lives. As you lift your gaze higher, you sense that this unveiling is not just personal but cosmic. Chosen one, this is the moment you realize nothing was wasted. The silence, the rejection, the delays, all became the foundation of your rising. Subscribe if you haven't yet, like this video, and comment, "I am chosen to let this message anchor in your soul." Please share it with someone who needs to hear this. To all the members who keep this light alive, thank you. For full prophetic revelations daily, join the membership via the link in the description. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. Step into the full light. And if this message moved you deeply, Consider tapping the Super Thanks button to support the mission. Every Super Thanks fuels the light we're spreading together. You were never ordinary. You were always chosen, and the fire they feared most has only just begun to rise.